Hello friends, for today's video I'm going to be going through some thoughts for episodes 6 through 10 of the original Avatar: The Last Airbender. I did do a first impressions video talking about episodes 1 through 5, and initially I was thinking I would just go through episodes 1 through 5 and then do a season 1 review once I'd gotten through the whole series, or I should say the whole first season of the series. But after watching the next few episodes I was like, no, I want to talk about smaller chunks. I don't want to wait until I've watched the full 20 episodes and then talk about it, because there's just so many things to point out per episode. All that said, these are my fresh first time viewer thoughts, and it's not going to be particularly organized or anything like that. As I watch the show, I write down things that stand out to me, things I find funny, things I find moving, really masterful ways in which they capture the world building and the character development and things like that. So we're going to jump into it with episode 6. If you don't remember exactly what happens per episode, I'll give about a 1-sentence summary of what's transpiring in that episode and then the things that stood out to me within. So for episode 6, this is when we have just left off with the city, the earthbending city, and Aang running into somebody he knew, which was actually really sweet. It was, in my opinion, episode 5, the weakest of the series so far. But the reason I'm kind of segueing from there is that a reminder that we're in the earthbender area. And with this one, we're looking at an area where they don't have a whole city. They're not well fortified. You're looking at more on the outskirts. And in this area, earthbenders, if their powers show, then the Fire Nation will take them and they will have them out on ships to keep them from land and thus keep them from being able to use their earthbending. Aang, Sokka, and Katara discover this when they're traipsing through the wilderness and they run into somebody who's using earthbending, and they discover this person is using earthbending in secret because it is their only way of still maintaining some kind of connection with their father, who was taken by the Fire Nation. This episode, I thought, had a really great short story within it. I do think that the pacing initially, I have praised the pacing for this show in that it really knows how to get to the point without feeling like it's just throwing so much exposition on you all at once. This one, though, leaned a little bit into it is throwing just everything at you really, really quick. Things move really, really fast. And I think this could have been a 2-episode long arc, because I think it would have made the end of the episode a little more impactful as well. At the end of the episode, you see after Katara has tried to rescue the person that has been taken, the one that was using earthbending, she has this, great rallying speech, and nobody really resonates with it. Nobody responds to it. They've just been beaten into submission by the Fire Nation. And then at the end of the episode, after she decides, no, I'm going to stay, I'm going to fight for these people, it's wrong, I can't leave them. Then from there, people kind of finally do decide, this girl, I'm going to stick up for this girl, and we're going to stick up for ourselves. And I think that all would have been a little bit more impactful if we had an additional episode, get to know the characters a little bit more, get to know just the amount that has been put on the people of this village, how awful it is to be separated from their family members, to not really know how they are and how they're doing. I think a little more time spent here would have been more impactful. That does not mean, though, that I think it was a bad episode. I thought it was great. I actually really liked that when Katara gave her rallying speech that nobody really responded at first, and everybody was kind of just like, eh. And even the Fire Nation, they were about to pull her away, and their leader on the ship anyway, he stopped them, just kind of like, let her get her hopes up, and then for it to all come falling down, because that's going to make her eventually give up too, because he's so accustomed to it. Clearly he is experienced in taking hope away from people. So in a weird way, as morbid as it sounds, I liked that she had to face that failure before trying again, because I think it's a really powerful message where when we fail or when we try and people do not resonate with what we're saying, they don't get behind us, they don't rally behind us, what do we do next? Do we just decide, well, I guess that's it then, or do we persevere? Do we try again? And I think what was great about this episode too is that Aang, Sokka, and Katara, their goal was not, we are going to rescue these people all on our own, because they know they're not really able to do that, but they're like, what if we can give these people the means to save themselves? Because they recognize that there is spirit and there is drive in these people and there is strength. They just don't have that spark, that initial first thing that would help them. And Aang is able to use his bending to help them with that, but otherwise they do end up basically freeing themselves, and it was very satisfying. I just think it could have been a little more powerful had we had a little more time with them. I also noted, I said Sokka is starting to become the responsible one, because at the very beginning of the episode, you see he's, he's trying to collect food, and they're like, this food sucks. And then they go into the village, they go to sleep, and Katara wants to stay up, and Aang wants to stay up, and he's like, we gotta go to bed early, because we gotta wake up early, and then we gotta get away from this Fire Nation, which is so different than how he was just a couple of episodes ago. A couple episodes ago, his way of establishing, I'm the leader, I'm so smart, and I'm the one that just inherently is going to be better than the two of you because I'm older and I'm a boy, so it's double the reason. That was his main points in his mind. And now he's actually starting to take steps. He's starting to think about their schedule, about thinking ahead, about being responsible, planning for, if they're going to do this, here's what we need to do now. And he's trying to genuinely look out for other people. And I know it's a tiny little example, but it's already a shift in his character that I'm really liking. And it's not like suddenly he is the best, because we'll see in another episode here in a second. It's not like suddenly he's perfect, but we're seeing the steps. We're seeing growth, which we are always so excited about. Oh, I have a quote. So the lemur, they're trying to purposefully get Katara captured so they can figure out where everybody who is an earthbender is taken. So they're trying to make it look like she's using earthbending, and her brother are going through this really obviously scripted fight, and they're like, you're gonna pay for that. And she's like, I'll make you pay. And she says, like, earthbending style, really on the nose. And the whole thing is Aang is using his powers to have air move a rock, but it looks like Katara's doing it. And the stupid guard is like, that lemur is using earthbending, and it's such a dumb joke. But it was so funny to me because it's already such a ridiculous scene because it's so obvious that the two of them are not actually fighting and they're just trying to get attention. So then to have the guard be so stupid as to think that the lemur is using, I don't know. It was a really dumb joke, but it was, some dumb jokes are just dumb, and then some dumb jokes are so dumb that they're clever, and I feel like this one fell into that camp. And then when the guards are arguing, because they're like, there was a flying buffalo, and then they're like, I thought it was a bison, and then they're arguing about if it was a buffalo or a bison, and that was greatly amusing to me. It was also greatly amusing because, this is so random, but as somebody who lives in North America, most people in North America, in talking about the animal they see in Yellowstone, they often mix up buffalo and bison. And there is one in North America, and the other does not exist in, it's in the continent of Africa. It is not in this continent. Episode 7, there's a spirit haunting a village, and then also as far as what's going on with Zuko, Uncle Iroh is captured. So, Aang is feeling lost, and I was really glad that we kind of came back to this plot line of Aang knows he's important. It's not that he's shying away from his responsibilities, but one, it's a lot of responsibilities on a kid, and two, given the circumstances, he has no idea what he's supposed to do, and so he's feeling really lost. He doesn't know how he's supposed to do anything, and he's starting to kind of feel a little bit defeated. It's like there's not only the weight of this burden, but he's starting to really feel just how heavy that burden is. And I also put Sokka doesn't want Aang to face the spirit alone. So this made me really happy too. Again, another moment where Sokka is starting to have growth already, because you're seeing when the spirit shows up and it starts to take Aang, and everybody's like, no, the Avatar has to deal with it on their own. And Sokka pushes his way through, and he's like, I'm not going to let Aang face that on his own. And he goes to help. And I'm like, yay! It's just great to see him wanting to be there for his friends, wanting to protect other people. And I just really loved that he didn't want to leave Aang to deal with this by himself. I also wrote that everything is going to be okay, which was Katara, a quote where Katara, after, if you don't recall what happens in this episode, the spirit takes both Aang and Sokka. It takes Sokka, you don't really know what's happened to him. Aang seems suddenly in the spirit world, but not in the physical world, and so Katara is now alone. And you keep seeing Katara say things like this. She says earlier, she says, like, Aang will figure it out. You'll figure it out. Everything was going to be okay. And I think this is hinting at something with Katara as a character, which is that she sort of just oftentimes almost naively wills things into working out. And she sometimes has a hard time actually seeing the reality of what's going on around her. And you saw a hint of that in the previous episode as well, because she had this idea of like, well, if I can just like pump these people up, everything will be fine. And it worked out in the end, but she had to face that failure. She's still dealing with that. She still is like, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. And I think she holds on to this is my, I guess you could say this is a prediction that I think this is something that's going to manifest and eventually we're going to see it come to fruition here. But I think she has a tendency to suppress the more difficult things, the more serious things, in favor of focusing on the desired outcome and just with all of her heart believing it's going to be that, even when there's a chance it won't be, because it's almost too difficult for her to face what the reality actually is showing her. So I'm curious to see how that will be explored, because she does have a tendency to say that a lot. Her brother even sometimes, even though he can be annoying about it, he'll be like, no, Katara, this is not what's going on. You need to face the facts. And she's like, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And it's not always fine. So I kind of am curious to see what's going to transpire with that aspect of her character. Okay, so Iroh being captured. At one point he rolls off, and then like when he gets picked up and they put him back on the things they're writing, you see his shoe was left behind. He's obviously trying to create a trail for Zuko to find him. And I'm like, his shoe was a sandal. Couldn't he have just kind of like kicked it off without falling down? I just felt like that felt a little, that plot line was like a little silly because some of what he did, I was like, I feel like there was simpler ways to do. So it's fine. It's not like an intense criticism or something, but I was just kind of like, oh, he could have just left it. But I will say, regardless, when Zuko finds the shoe, the fact that he knows it's his uncle because the shoe smells really bad, I found that to be very entertaining. At the end, I said Zuko goes for Iroh instead of Aang, and I even attempted to do the like stupid little twinkly-eyed emotional emoji that's like, no, with the like little, you know what I'm talking about, the watering eyes emoji, because I'm like, he loves his uncle. He loves his uncle more than proving his father, whatever he's trying to prove to his dad, you know, he's trying to gain his honor back, but he loves his uncle. And it was nice to see him go for his uncle instead of Aang. Anyway, so everything works out. The spirit, turns out, was a panda. That was sad because the forest had been burned down, and Aang shows it that there is life that is going to exist. And it's kind of hinting at maybe optimism's not always bad, because it was Katara that was the one to present it, but optimism coupled with factual information and not just hoping everything will work out fine. But showing that and giving that hope back to the spirit, it kind of gave it some semblance of peace. And then also we got set up for a future plot line, which is that Aang, if he's going to learn from the previous Avatar, really needs to get into this place that's in the Fire Nation by a certain date, and that date is coming up. So they're on their way to do that, and it's very pressing at this point. Episode 8. Aang needs to go to the Fire Nation to talk to Roku. That's what I just described. And I wrote good ominous music. There was some ominous music early on. I'm like, ooh, I like this music. That's not going to mean anything because I probably can't play it because of like copyright and stuff, but the music was good. I liked the music there. Zuko's trying really hard, but he's not supposed to be going back, and that other general shows up. The blockade fight was pretty cool, and I said I was worried for Appa, because if you don't know, in this episode, in their attempt to get to the Fire Nation, there is a lot of water in this area, and the Fire Nation ships are blocking the area that Aang and gang need to get to, and Zuko as well is trying to follow them, and you have this blockade of ships, and they're riding Appa through, and they start shooting like catapults and stuff, and I'm like, no, Appa, be safe. And at one point a little bit of fire goes and they're trying to put him out, and I'm like, no. But they make it. But the fight was actually pretty cool, because it sounds like it would be a pretty basic, boring fight of just like, oh, I guess they're just shooting catapults at them. They're not shooting catapults at them. They're using catapults to shoot things at them. Would be interesting if they shot catapults at them. But anyway, so they're trying to get them down, and that sounds like it would be boring, but it was actually done really well, and it was like very edge of your seats. And I mean, I knew our characters were going to be fine, but I didn't really know if they would come out completely unscathed. Or if they would get captured, or if one of them would get captured or something. I didn't really know. I did write a detail that I appreciated was the Fire Nation architecture has flame shapes. So this particular temple area they're going to, the way that the buildings go up, look like flames, which I thought was really cool. They're really great about having these small details that they don't feel the need to point. It's not like the characters show up and they're like, wow, you can definitely tell it's Fire Nation because the building looks like fire. They don't say that. It's just a thing for you to pick up on and appreciate, which I really, really like. It's a great world building detail. I put Sokka uses problem solving skills to open the Fire Nation door. It doesn't quite work initially, but again, yay to see Sokka applying his mind to try and solve a problem. The setup in the what you learn in this is that there's going to be a comet that, a reminder, because I'm sure if you're watching this, you've watched the show before, but there's going to be a comet that's going to give the Fire Nation more power, and that's what happened previously, and there's another one that's supposed to happen, and it's supposed to happen really soon. So it puts, it shortens the timeline. Anytime in a story you want to create suspense and stakes, that's kind of a tried and true way, is shorten the timeline. And also, I really liked when Avatar Roku when the doors open and the Fire Nation soldiers were there and there was that really awesome moment. I was like, yeah, I wrote my notes, let's go. A detail I appreciated is when the fire's coming through and Sokka and Katara are huddling, Sokka actually kind of shields his sister with his body, and I'm like, ugh. Nobody pointed that out, but I'm just like, there he is being brave. There's him actually being brave. He's showing example after example, and it's funny how he went from being like the annoying brother to a character that I'm like, is he gonna be my favorite? So I just, that happening in the corner, I was like, oh, yay. So anyway, in episode 9, Aang tries to learn waterbending. This show does a good job of when you get a more high stakes, more plot heavy, overall plot heavy moment, you do kind of follow up with something that feels a little lighter. It doesn't feel like we've completely abandoned and it's a filler episode, but it still kind of has that nice ebb and flow, which is not a Water Nation pun. It's just, it's nice. I think the pacing's good there. So he's trying to learn water bending. I put Appa rolling around in the water. Aw, I like Appa so much. I'm always a sucker, though, for any kind of dog or animal character in a story, so I was just praising Sokka, but I'm like, maybe Appa's my favorite. The music when Aang gets water bending was great. It's like, again, I can't play the music probably, but the water bending music that they played was really funny and entertaining and cool, and it matched the water bending really well. Also, the cabbage guy. So in the episode 5, when they go to the Fire Nation city, and they're riding that basically cool mail system through the city, and they crash into stuff, and there's a guy who was trying to get into the city to sell his cabbage. He got into the city, and then they accidentally crashed into his stuff and went flying, and he's like, my cabbage, he's back. There's another moment where our characters are running through a city and some guy's stuff gets knocked over and he's like, no, my cabbage. And you're like, oh no, the cabbage guy. This poor guy can't catch a break. So what we're learning here is our main characters, they might be heroes to us, but they're villains to somebody else. Sokka convinces the pirates not to give Aang up. Sneaky, sneaky. So again, a reminder if you don't know what's happening in this moment, the pirates have realized that Aang is worth something to the Fire Nation, and Sokka capitalizes on this by being like, hey, you'll get way more trying to get him back to the Fire Nation than this stupid scroll, so don't exchange him for the scroll. You've got way more right here with you, because they're trying not to fall into Zuko's hands. It's really sad when Katara yelled at Aang. That made me sad, but at the same time, I was happy for it, because I think you need these moments where people get frustrated, people get jealous, people get petty. It's a very natural human emotion, and I'm glad the show is not afraid to depict that. This fight breaks out between Zuko and the pirates, and everybody's trying to get the scroll, everybody's trying to get Aang, everybody's fighting, and all this dust gets kicked up, and Sokka and Aang are trying to find each other, and they're like, where are you, where are you? And Aang's like, follow my voice, I'm here. And then he uses air bending to get all the dust away, and when all the dust clears, he realizes he's in the middle of everyone. I just hit my mic, sorry. He realizes he's in the middle of everyone, and he's like, never mind, I'll find you. And then he just lets all the dust come back, which, again, I like the humor in this show. I think it's adorable and silly and cute. At the end of that episode, they get the scroll. Yay. Now on to episode 10, last one for today's discussion. This is the freedom fighters are trying to rid the forest of the Fire Nation. Jet, I hated this guy. As soon as I saw him, I was like, I hate this guy. I'm with Sokka. He sucks. He sucks for some reason, and I feel like he's deceitful. And the show's not, I'm not saying like, I'm smart because I figured that out. I'm not saying that at all. They set you up pretty clearly to know, like, this guy is a tool, right? We can see that. So anyway, that's what's happening in this episode. Another detail, I mentioned this in the previous video, but I want to highlight it again. The show has done a really good job of subtly having the colors that you would expect for each of the nations be present whenever they go to those areas. So if it's an earthbending, there tends to be earth tones. If it's waterbending, lots of blues. Fire Nation, lots of reds. You get it. This one, you have the Fire Nation and the Earth Nation are kind of in this area. And what was really cool is that the forest, which is more earth associated, has a lot of red leaves. So it's like a combination of both tribes, which I thought was a subtle detail that I thought was worth noting. I thought it was also really pretty. The visuals in this episode were really, really great. And then I wrote, Jet is awful to the old man. Tell him, Sokka, because Sokka sticks up for him. He's like, he's just an old guy. Leave him alone, when Jet tries to stop the old man. And then Sokka saved the town. That's really all I wrote, because this episode was a lot of like, when are they going to realize that this guy sucks? Oh, good, they realize this guy sucks, but now they need to save the town. And again, we see Katara and Aang initially, they kind of failed. They did not succeed in realizing the deception in time. They weren't able to use their bending in time, and it was through Sokka's intelligence, perception, and perseverance that he was able to save the town, in spite of the fact that in some ways they would have been able to get something on their enemies here, and by their enemies we mean the Fire Nation, but he recognizes not every single human being that's a part of the Fire Nation is actually our enemy. So Jet, didn't like that guy, but Sokka is continuing to grow as a character. I'm really loving him a lot. We haven't seen too much Zuko, so I'm hoping in the next few episodes that we'll get a little more of that. I'm still waiting to see what's going on with him and his dad. I want to know all of those details. And Iroh is definitely really fun and entertaining. Obviously, we really need to get to the Water Nation, so I'm expecting, hopefully, that we get to one of our nations soon, because I need Aang to learn how to bend the other powers. So anyway, that's it for episodes 6 through 10. I am continuing to love this show. Luna loves it too, if you hear her barking. Thanks so much for watching though. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later. Bye.